You're a new real estate investor and you're getting caught up on a term that I think gets thrown around a lot and maybe shouldn't be so much, and it's called cash flow. Everybody that buys a real estate property or investment always is talking about cash flow. I did the same thing. I still do the same thing to a certain extent, but I've also learned a lot over time. I recently was involved and watched one of my really good friends, David Greene's YouTube. It was a live stream that he did, and one person kind of started to ask about macroeconomics, not getting really bogged down on the little things, and David Greene fielded this question, and I really wanted to bring this to you to kind of hear what he said. Let's check it out.
All right, let's do a couple more of these. I think Daniel Kim had a good question here. As a newer investor, how do you develop that macro mindset of the real estate market? As you mentioned, instead of focusing on the minutia, how did you expedite that process? Well, Daniel, the first piece is I probably didn't expedite that process. I had to go through the same learning curve. I didn't have a David Greene that was telling me I needed to be thinking differently. Okay. I didn't really have mentors. So that was a piece of it. That's why I kind of talk about this stuff more.
I know he hasn't said much, but I just want to say one thing. One thing is he is becoming a trailblazer. So if you are a new investor, you need to be listening to, watching, and consuming the trailblazers. I'm not necessarily, I feel like David Greene's the big trailblazer, right? I came in his path or in his wake, but I'm still listening to what he has to say. And the people behind me are listening to what I have to say. And so now that I've had 15 plus years of investing in real estate underneath my belt, I'm able to see more clearly things that I couldn't necessarily see before. And that's what David's saying here. So let's get into the meat of it.
Because hearing it over and over and over will help you to get past it. And then also part of it was the facts that like smacked me in the face that I had. It was hard not to confront them when they hit you. So here was, I remember I've had several, I don't know if epiphany is the right word, but like a paradigm shifts over my investing career. The first one I can remember was that I started buying in end of 2009. The market had been crashing. And I was looking at every deal I bought like everyone else does. It's got a cash flow. Cash flow is the only reason I'm buying. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. Appreciation. You never know. It might go down even more. Okay. And so I bought a house a year for the first 4 years or so. 2013 came.
Interesting. I did the exact same thing. So I started buying around 2009, 2010, and my thought process was buy a house a year. Now, you can say that I didn't do it as well as David Greene because he's got all these houses now, but I think he just understood big concepts a little faster than I did. Plus, we didn't have things like Bigger Pockets podcast, all these podcasts, Falisha Rexford YouTube, David Greene YouTube. We didn't have all of these places to go to learn at an exponential rate. So that's why he's saying he's having multiple epiphanies, because let's just face it, we've had to figure it out ourselves, right? So here's the epiphany, and it's just crazy because I'm just so in sync with what he has to say here.
And the market turned around faster than I ever could have imagined. It just went from the houses listed for 200,000. I would call the bank and say, would you take 150? To houses listed at 200,000, 6 offers sold for 230. It was like over 1 month, like springtime hit. All the people that went through a short sale in 2010 now were eligible to get a loan. And they're like, oh, this is a third of what I paid for the house when I lost it. And it's a 30-year fixed rate that's lower than what I had before. And I'm getting the Obama credit, $7,500. Heck yeah, I'm buying houses. And they just scooped up everything. And then there was also a phenomenon I learned that when prices dropped low enough, like I didn't know how this worked. I thought they just keep going down. I'm like, well, eventually I could buy a house for $1. I'll just wait. I didn't realize that there's a certain point where investors say, oh, this makes a lot of money for me. And then they jump in and they start soaking up the inventory. So they never hit the true bottom that you would think, because there's someone else where that house is worth more to them than it would be to the person in my position.
We're getting there. I promise we're getting there. But again, so many things that he said. And yes, we bought back then. And since then, my first house that I bought was $75,000 or $80,000. The next house I bought was $80,000 or $85,000. And I understand that if you're watching this right now, you're wanting to stop almost because you're like, that's not the case anymore. No, it is the case, because as I've purchased, it's continued the appreciation game, and we just weren't super knowledgeable of that. So he's definitely getting there. But it's funny that he said something about waiting for it to go down more. I cannot tell you how many people in 2010, 11, 12, 13 were telling me, what are you doing buying? Why aren't you just waiting for it to go down more? And my constant reaction to that was, because it's a good deal now. And at that time, it was cash flowing, i.e. my mortgages were $500, $600, and I was renting those properties out for about $1,000 to $1,100. So it was fine. It was covering my mortgage. It was paying all the bills. I had some extra money in the bank. I wasn't even touching any of that cash flowing money. So I was fine. And I felt like it was a good deal. Whereas you're always going to have people around you, always going to have people around you that are just like, just wait it out. Just wait for it to get better. And you know what? They miss the ship all the time. So if the numbers make sense, whether it's cash flow or whatever it is that your dynamic is about, I would also say, stop listening to the people that are always telling you, just wait, it's going to get better, because they wait forever.
So real estate became so expensive so quick, I couldn't buy it. It just didn't cash flow anymore. And I spent about a year sulking. I just felt sorry for myself. Well, this sucks. I should have bought more houses. It's too late. And then I eventually watched a lady on the news, and she was a real estate agent in Phoenix, and she was talking about how much inventory they have and they're not selling, and cash flow is really strong. And I was like, ooh, what is this? What is this Arizona real estate you speak of? This is interesting. And I didn't know long distance investing was risky. So I contacted her. I flew out there. I went and looked at houses. That was the beginning of me buying out of state when nobody else was, that I knew of at least, was doing that. That's how I put down together the systems that were in long distance investing. But when I started buying in Arizona, I had cash flow again. So I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. That's why I'm telling that story.
I have to pause again, because while he branched out from his local real estate market to purchase out of state, I did the exact same thing. So I was purchasing in Las Vegas, Nevada, and then I felt like I got priced out of the market. My properties weren't cash flowing anymore. Darn it, I wish I would have just bought more in Las Vegas, but I didn't. Instead, I started looking outward. So I actually went to Ohio. It was a market that I could still attain property for a lot less, which, by the way, if this is 2020, it's 2022 right now, but let's just say that this YouTube video, you're watching it for the next few years, the East Coast is usually the place that you can still get a lot of those deals in comparison to the West Coast prices. So if wherever you're at in life, if you're looking for something that may be more tangible for you, maybe look at the East Coast. So I went to Ohio. I had to learn an out-of-state market. Yes, but I was able to pick up those properties again for $125,000, whereas back in Las Vegas, they were going for $260,000, and I didn't have the money for that. So again, looking out of state, I wanted to start cash flowing again. David Greene and I are paralleling lives here, not even understanding or realizing it, but it was always about cash flow. Still got more.
Bought a little bit in Arizona. Prices got to be too high out there to cash flow, had the same problem, and I just moved. I was like, this is the locust pattern that I talk about. I moved into North Florida, and I started buying out in Jacksonville. Well, when I was buying in Jacksonville, I realized I had become a millionaire and didn't know it. I literally did not know what net worth meant or how to track it. It's not complicated, but no one had ever talked about it. I didn't look at equity in my properties. I didn't measure it because I didn't think it mattered. I only looked at cash flow. So when my houses became more expensive, I thought that was bad. And then I realized that I was a millionaire and had been one for a while and had no clue. That was like a crazy moment.
Let's talk about that. This absolutely happens to many investors that have been in the game long enough. It's kind of hard for us in, I think, American culture to be able to say, I'm a millionaire, or my net worth is now millions of dollars, right? But in reality, what that means is, besides the assets that you have in the bank, the assets that you own like real estate, if you look at that equity growth, that equity amount for the balance that you owe to what it's actually owed, that is also calculated into your net worth. And this happens because you pick up a house here, and then you pick up a house here, and you pick up a house here. And while you're picking up these houses, what happens? Time passes by. Naturally, time passes by. And with time, what happens? Equity growth. Historically speaking, equity is constantly growing in properties. And so if I bought back in 2010 and we're sitting in 2022, you guys do the math, and I've bought a house a year, if I go back to house number one, holy crap, that thing now has $200,000 of equity in it, $300,000 worth of equity in it. Multiply that by 18 properties, and now you don't even realize that you technically are a millionaire. And that's not something that, again, I don't think people they don't like hearing that term. This is a positive thing. You've got more money to work with than what you realize. So how can you make that money start to work with you? You've already done the initial investments, right? And they're cash flowing and things like that. But now you've got equity to where you can pull it out and let your money make money. And that's when the snowball really starts to become an avalanche. In the beginning, you're just building the snowballs. But over the course of time, with the houses growing in equity, now you can really start that avalanche effect with your real estate investing. Let's see how he wraps this up.
For me, that was definitely a paradigm shift. I was walking around the Powell Street BART station in San Francisco, and the words, I'm a millionaire, just kept going through my head. Like something changed inside me. I didn't get a big ego. It was more, I saw a millionaire as you've done something really well. You've been very successful. And I was confused that I had been that way for a long time, but didn't know it. I can't think of a good analogy off the top of my head. I mean, it would be like if you just never took off your shirt and then one day you had a six pack. You're like, I've had a six pack this whole time and I didn't realize that. Like I could have been a fitness model and I didn't know it. That was kind of how that felt. And then I bought a bunch of property in Florida. And one day I was doing the podcast and I was thinking like, I wonder how much equity I'd have to get before I caught my cash flow in Florida. And I went and looked at it and I realized that my first 5 California properties had made significantly more than all 25 of the Florida properties that I had bought. And that was another like, how is that possible?
In equity, the houses that he just bought made more money in equity growth than the houses that he may have been holding on to long term with cash flow, just buying in the right markets.
These 5 have outperformed the Florida portfolio. And then not only did the California properties appreciate in value way more, their cash flow goes up too. Like you forget that appreciation applies to rent. Okay, so those properties that I bought in my fourplex in California that were, when I bought it, were $700 a month, and I bumped it up to $800, and I was like, I've added $400. That's like a 20% increase. I'm so good at this. Now it's like $1,800 or $1,900 a month that we rent that thing out for.
Thank you, David Greene. That's pretty much all that I'm going to use him for, because this is how we're going to wrap it up. So if you're purchasing something right now and the cash flow doesn't look great, let's say you're cash flowing $200 a month, whatever the case may be. Who cares? Who cares? You are literally having your costs covered plus some that you can put aside in the bank account for a rainy day when the water heater goes out, what have you. Over the course of time, you're also going to grow in equity growth. In turn, you can pull money out and you can purchase more properties. But let's also remember that even though the property may not cash flow a ton right now, again, time is your friend. And over the course of time, with inflation and things like that consistently moving, rents even go up. So great example, one of my very first second property that I purchased, we initially rented it out for about $1,100. Just like I told you, we bought it for $80,000. We're renting it out for $1,100 years ago. It's now renting out for just under $2,000 a month. And so my mortgage is still $500. And although I was cash flowing decent in the past, even if I wasn't, over the course of time, rents have also increased. It's a single story house, 3-bed, 2-bath, large backyard. Everything's fenced in for an animal. It's the perfect little rental. So don't get over obsessive about the nuances of every deal. I would say that getting in and just getting a property under your belt and holding it over the course of time will open up more doors for you than sometimes you can realize right then in the moment. I'm also not saying don't analyze the deal, just buy whatever. I'm not saying that. But even if it doesn't cash flow dramatically, or if it's not enough to make you happy, but it's in a location around the country that's something that you can hold and maintain for a long time, that property in turn will grow with cash flow, grow with equity in it, where you could probably pull out, and that little snowball will create more snowballs, which in fact will create your real estate avalanche, let's just call it. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. It was talking a lot about a little bit of macroeconomics, but not getting caught up into the small things, time being on your side, growing equity growth in assets, not being overly upset about cash flow, really realizing that over time, as long as you get your foot in the door with real estate investing, you are going to succeed. Remember, at the end of the day, if you have any questions about real estate buying, selling, investing, all the things, who's your homegirl? I'm your homegirl.